Ned Stark rose before the dawn, every joint aching, as though the weight of the Iron Throne itself pressed upon his shoulders. For a time, he simply stood at the window of his bedchamber, gazing out over the rooftops of King's Landing. The city was still blanketed in quiet gloom. Far below, he could make out faint lanterns bobbing on the streets, a handful of bakers or butchers rising early to prepare their wares. Soon, the clamor of the day would begin. Shouting fishmongers in the markets, squabbling urchins in the alleys, and the rattle of armor as gold cloaks started their patrols. Yet, in these pre-dawn moments, the city almost seemed at peace. He felt no peace within himself. The nightmares of the previous night still gnawed at the edges of his mind. Wolves locked in struggle with golden-maned lions, the swirl of blood and steel, those images refused to fade. Eddard Stark was no stranger to violence, nor to the weight of responsibility. He had fought in Robert's rebellion and had seen friends and kin lost to swords and arrows. But this was different. Now the realm itself teetered on the knife's edge, and he could not see a path to safety. He had killed Jaime Lannister in single combat. That was a truth he could neither deny nor soften. Though Jaime had provoked him, though it had been a matter of defense, House Lannister would never see it that way. At any moment, Tywin's host might surge eastward into the Riverlands. By all reports, Gregor Clegane was already terrorizing those western borders, raiding and burning, an unmistakable threat of what was to come if House Stark and King Robert did not yield to the Old Lion's demands. Still wearing only a light robe, Ned stepped away from the window. On a small table lay the letter he had finished the previous night, addressed to Robb Stark at Winterfell. He had written carefully, admonishing his son to avoid rash moves, to remain vigilant but not to strike first. It went against the northern instinct to meet threat with equal ferocity, but open war might doom them all. Ned took a deep, measured breath. The letter would go to the Rookery at once. Grand Maester Pycelle would see it dispatched. Unless Pycelle was already working with the Lannisters and decided to misplace the message. But no, Pycelle was loyal to the king, or so he professed. Ned could only trust that his words would reach Robb intact. When he emerged into the corridor, he found a pair of gold cloaks waiting, as always, to escort him. He gave them a curt nod. He was permitted to move within the Red Keep under guard, a far gentler cage than a dungeon cell, but a cage nonetheless. The men nodded back, and Ned led them through winding halls toward the keep's rookery. They passed a few yawning servants carrying brooms, and the occasional guard who saluted the hand. No, the former hand, Ned reminded himself bitterly. Even so, most appeared uneasy or looked away. Word traveled quickly. He could guess what they whispered. That the king's one-time hand had murdered the Kingslayer in cold blood. That House Lannister was massing an army. That soon blood would run in the gutters of King's Landing. Ned entered the rookery, a round chamber set high in a tower, its interior dark save for pale dawn light seeping through a row of narrow windows. Dozens of ravens perched in wicker cages, ruffling black feathers and croaking softly. The air smelled of droppings and old straw. Grand Maester Pycelle was not present. In his stead was a gangly young acolyte who squinted at Ned with barely masked curiosity. Ned wordlessly handed him the sealed parchment. "See, this is sent to Maester Luwin at Winterfell," Ned said quietly, tone carrying a weight that brooked no argument. "My seal is upon it. Let none delay it." The acolyte swallowed, giving a small bow. "At once, my lord. The bird will fly within the hour." Ned lingered a moment, staring at the ravens. He wondered if any letters from Catelyn might be waiting here. None had come from the Eyrie in days. Lisa had proven unpredictable, and Catelyn might be in a precarious position. With Tyrion free, Lisa's anger at the Lannisters might have flared anew, or she might blame Catelyn for losing such a valuable prisoner. Worry knotted Ned's brow, but he tried to set it aside. One crisis at a time. He left the rookery, his gold cloaks trailing behind him. Along the corridor, they encountered no one of note until they reached the base of the tower. There, Ned glimpsed Barristan Selmy, clad in the Kingsguard's pristine white cloak, speaking quietly with a younger knight. The Lord Commander's lined face brightened a fraction at the sight of Ned. "Lord Stark," Selmy said with polite gravity, "I had hoped to find you. The kings demanded we hold a meeting with the small council within the hour. He says the realm cannot wait any longer to address Tywin Lannister's provocations. Will you attend? You remain involved, if not in official capacity." Ned gave a short nod. "I'll come. Let on." They walked together, the younger knight hurrying off with some errand. Selmy glanced at Ned's gold cloaks but did not comment. Where once Ned might have strolled freely, now he marched under watch, an illustration of how quickly fortunes changed in King's Landing. They made their way through a broad corridor lined with columns. Sunlight streamed through windows, illuminating motes of dust swirling in the air. At this early hour, the Red Keep was somewhat subdued, though the occasional retainer or courtier darted by, arms laden with scrolls and ledgers. The tension was unmistakable. Everyone moved with a briskness that suggested urgent business. At last, they reached the council chamber, a spacious room dominated by a long table. King Robert arrived only moments after Ned, accompanied by 2 more Kingsguard. He looked tired, but that had become the norm. Dark circles under his eyes, unkempt hair that was no longer the thick black mane of his youth, and a face etched with worry. Though still broad of shoulder and thick in the chest, Robert carried that weight as though it were a burden instead of a symbol of strength. Gathered around the table were Grand Maester Pycelle, Peter Baelish, Varys, Renly Baratheon, and, somewhat surprisingly, Queen Cersei herself. She stood near a window, her posture rigid, green eyes hard. Even across the room, Ned felt the hostility emanating from her. Killing Jaime had not only taken her brother's life, it had wounded a part of her too, though he dared not let his thoughts dwell on the rumors that had long circled about the twins. Robert took his seat at the head of the table, letting out a weary grunt. Cersei moved to stand on his left, arms folded. Everyone else settled as well, though Ned remained standing, uncertain if he was truly welcome. The king waved a hand, indicating that Ned should join them. "This is a matter of the realm," Robert said, "and Ned is part of it whether we like it or not. Now let's have the gist of it." Renly cleared his throat and spoke up, appearing more somber than usual. "Word from our scouts confirms that Tywin Lannister's army has left Harrenhal and is moving east along the north bank of the God's Eye. They may be heading for the Trident or for Riverrun directly. Lord Hoster Tully is mustering his bannermen, but they are outnumbered. There's talk that Tywin has close to 20,000 men." A hush of alarm passed over the table. Pycelle adjusted his chain of office. Varys tapped his fingertips together, and Baelish's gaze flicked around with a calculating glint. Cersei spoke, her voice crisp. "My Lord Father will do what is necessary to avenge Jaime. The question, dear husband, is what you intend to do about it." Robert frowned heavily. "I have no love for Tywin's arrogance, but if he marches on the Riverlands, he threatens my realm. I am king, not Tywin. If he crosses that line, I must respond." He slammed a fist on the table. "By the Seven, I am done being bullied." Cersei's cheeks flushed, but she kept her tone measured. "He only demands justice. Justice for the murder of my beloved brother. You refuse to deliver Eddard Stark to him, so you provoke him." Ned bristled, but Robert spoke before he could. "I will not yield my friend to appease Tywin's wrath. His demand is outrageous. The realm cannot bend to one lord's thirst for vengeance." He turned to the others. "We must consider our options. War or a settlement. What say you all?" Pycelle, fiddling with his chain, ventured, "Your Grace, a war of this magnitude might cost tens of thousands of lives. House Lannister has deep coffers. The crown is indebted to them already. Might there be a diplomatic solution? A marriage alliance, or a substantial sum to, compensate House Lannister for their loss?" Renly's lip curled in distaste. "You'd pay blood money for Jaime Lannister's death?" Pycelle shrugged. "This is not unprecedented. Better to spend gold than to spill blood, some might argue." Cersei's gaze swung to Ned. "Your eldest daughter is betrothed to my son, though I see little progress on that front. Perhaps we should revisit the question of who marries whom. My father might be convinced that a new alliance with House Stark would at least partly satisfy. She trailed off as Ned's face darkened. I will not discuss Sansa as though she's some coin to be dropped into Tywin's palm. The betrothal to Joffrey was an arrangement blessed by the king and by me, but I see no reason to entangle her further with your father's anger. Cersei's eyes flashed dangerously. Then you leave me few options. My father will bring war to your doorstep if he must. Let him. Robert cut in, anger lighting his features. I'm the king? Or did you forget? We shall see if Lord Tywin truly wants to test my might. He turned to Varys. You spider. What do your whispers say of Tywin's real intentions? Varys inclined his head, folding his hands in front of him. My little birds sing many songs, your grace. Lord Tywin's words are loud, but his caution is well known. He would prefer to crush his foes swiftly if he believes they pose a grave threat. If he thinks you will not yield, he might instead attempt to break the Tully forces quickly and isolate the north, perhaps forcing Lord Stark's son to treat with him on less favorable terms. My guess is that if he cannot have Eddard Stark's head, he will want something else of great symbolic value. Gold, hostages, or a humiliating apology. But Tywin must move carefully. If he pushes too far and the king raises the royal host, the Lannisters might face more formidable resistance than they anticipate. Cersei's laugh came sharp as a knife. You assume Tywin fears the crown? My father has already crushed mightier foes in his day. The rebellion against the Targaryens was won with Lannister gold and Lannister steel, or have you forgotten? Baelish finally spoke, voice mild. I recall the rebellion being won with Robert's warhammer and Ned Stark's swords, but I suppose gold changed hands at the opportune time. Let us not rewrite history, my lady. Cersei directed a murderous glare at Peter, who merely smiled. Robert looked as though he might snap the table in half. Enough! I will not listen to more jabs. The question is how to avoid plunging half the realm into chaos. If Tywin marches on Riverrun, we must either let him ravage the Riverlands or muster our own forces to meet him. Both paths lead to bloodshed, unless... He trailed off uncertain. Ned took a breath. Unless we negotiate. I've had offers. He felt the weight of Cersei's gaze, but pressed on. Tyrion Lannister approached me. He claims he might persuade Tywin to accept terms short of my head, though the cost will be high. A ripple of surprise moved around the table. Robert blinked. The imp approached you? Why? Because he does not want to see the realm drown in blood, Ned replied. And because, perhaps, he wants to prove his own worth to his father. He suggested gold, apologies, maybe a marriage to tie the families. I told him nothing. But if your grace wishes, I can craft a proposal. It might buy us time or even real peace, if Tywin can be satisfied. Cersei's lip curled. Lies. Tyrion is cunning enough to trick you. He may bring your words to Tywin, twisting them for Lannister advantage. Ned's eyes flicked to her. That is possible. But if we fail to explore any option, war is certain. Robert tapped the table with one thick finger, pensive. I've known Tywin for years. He's not the type to compromise easily. But if the alternative is an uncertain war, maybe I can threaten to bring the entire might of the crown, the Reach, and the Stormlands against him if he refuses a fair settlement. He's prideful but not mad. Maybe the threat of a unified realm, plus an offer of restitution, will sway him. Pycelle ventured. That might be wise, your grace. If you show that the Tullys, the Arryns, and the North will join you rather than be picked off individually, Lord Tywin could think twice. Renly nodded. We must also consider the alliances we can rely upon. The Tyrells control the Reach, but are we certain they'd march if called? The Greyjoys are sullen and untrustworthy. The Vale is governed by Lysa Arryn, who grows more unstable with each passing month. Our best bet for a quick resolution might indeed be a peace agreement. Robert glanced at Ned. Can you do this, Ned? Can you come up with terms that might stay Tywin's hand? Ned hesitated, feeling Cersei's stare. I can try, your grace, but I'll need time and privacy to consider all angles. and I'll need your word that if I approach Tyrion, it is with your blessing. I will not be called a traitor for conducting negotiations behind the crown's back." Cersei made a sound of contempt, but Robert answered, "You have my blessing, if it might avert war. By the gods, I never thought I'd see the day that Ned Stark would dicker with a Lannister. But times are dark." He sighed. "Report back to me when you have something concrete." The meeting broke up shortly thereafter, with the king trudging off to his own solar, muttering oaths under his breath. Varys drifted away, Baelish behind him, leaving Ned alone in the corridor with Cersei. Selmy had departed to attend to the king's guard detail. Only 2 gold cloaks stood at either end of the corridor, well out of earshot. For a moment, Ned considered simply walking away, but the queen blocked his path, her eyes narrowed. She wore a gown of deep green velvet embroidered with golden lions, a high collar framing her striking face. Silence hung between them. Finally, she spoke. "You think you can salvage your life, Stark? Sway my father with a few promises." She gave a cold laugh. "I knew you were naive, but this verges on madness." Ned met her gaze evenly. "If madness spares thousands of lives, I will embrace it. Jaime attacked me and I ended him. Your father can roar and threaten, but the fact remains that his son died in an unequal fight. It is unfortunate, but it was Jaime's choice to cross blades with me. I will not apologize for defending myself." A flicker of raw emotion touched her face. Grief, fury, or both. Then she masked it. "His life was worth more than yours. You took from me someone who can never be replaced." Her voice wavered almost imperceptibly, but then it hardened again. "I would see you pay for that if I could, but it seems my husband is set on preserving you. Perhaps Tywin will succeed where Robert is too weak. One day, you may find that your honor will not save you from the lion's claws." Ned regarded her sternly. "You loved him. I understand that, but the fault lies with his choices. Your father can blame me, blame my house, blame half the realm. Changes nothing. Jaime is gone. Killing me won't bring him back." He paused, softening his tone ever so slightly. "If there's any grain of sense in Lord Tywin, or in you, you'll see that war will only destroy more families. How many mothers, sisters, wives will lose their loved ones? If a settlement can be reached—" She made a dismissive gesture, stepping away from him. "Do what you will, Stark. I doubt it will matter. My father seldom forgives such slights. But if you cling to a fool's hope, that is your affair." She swept past him, her perfume trailing in the air, and left him standing in the corridor with the gold cloaks looking on nervously. Ned exhaled. His conversation with Cersei only underscored the depth of the anger Tywin harbored. The old lion would not be swayed by mere words. The settlement must be carefully crafted to satisfy his pride and thirst for vengeance. If it was even possible. He returned to his chambers, heart heavy. Once inside, he found Arya pacing by the window and Sansa seated in a chair, wringing her hands. Both girls rose immediately at the sight of their father. Arya marched forward. "Is it true, father? The king's men say there's going to be war, that Lannisters are marching east to kill Tullis, and the gold cloaks might have to fight them. Everyone's terrified." She clenched her fists. "Let me fight with you if they come here. I won't let them take your head." Sansa made a little gasp. "Don't talk like that, Arya." Ned knelt, facing his youngest daughter. "Arya, no. You are brave, but your place is not on a battlefield. I hope there will be no battlefield in King's Landing. As for the Lannisters, I am trying to stop the war before it starts." Arya scowled. "Then talk to them. Tell them we're not afraid. Or is that not how it works down here?" He almost smiled at her fierce innocence. "I'm doing what I can, in the way these southern lords understand best. Through letters and agreements. War is a last resort. We do not want more bloodshed." Sansa stepped forward, voice trembling. "Is Joffrey going to fight? He is a prince. But he's also so young." She hesitated. "We're still betrothed, aren't we?" Ned felt a pang. Sansa was caught between her illusions of gallant knights and the grim reality of Lannister fury. Yes, the betrothal stands, at least for now. But don't trouble yourself about Joffrey's role in any fighting. War is for older men, men with experience in arms. Joffrey is hardly more than a boy. He spoke gently, though privately he wondered if Cersei would push Joffrey forward if it served her designs. Sansa pursed her lips, nodding. Arya turned away, frustration clear in her posture. Ned rose, placing a steadying hand on each daughter's shoulder in turn. Stay close to our chambers, both of you. The castle is safe enough, but these are uneasy times. If you go anywhere, take a guard. Arya huffed. I can protect myself. Ned gave her a weary but fond look. Nevertheless, she frowned, but relented. Ned squeezed her shoulder lightly before releasing her. He then sat near the window, gazing at the city beyond. Thoughts churned in his mind. Tyrion's suggestion of marriage alliances, Baelish's thinly veiled offer to help craft a compromise, Varys's warnings, even Robert's grudging approval. None of it felt comfortable or honorable in the way that Ned understood honor. But if it spared thousands of lives, he went to the small desk in the corner, rummaging for parchment and ink. His leg twinged, a reminder of the earlier injury inflicted by Jaime's men. As he laid out a blank sheet, his daughters retreated to the far side of the room, speaking in low voices. Ned drew a quill across his lips in thought. Then, slowly, he began to write.